Released in 2017, the Pro Controller has been out for quite a while now. However, with rumors of the Nintendo Switch Pro being released soon, you may be wondering if it's still worth picking up a Pro Controller. This is the Nintendo Switch Pro Controller, and this is my opinion. Now let's firstly take a look at the design of this thing. I'm a really big fan of the way the Switch Pro Controller looks. It has this semi-transparent look on the main panel here. And if you take a look at these shapes, they look a bit like the Unknown or something. Top of the controller here has this glossy finish, which I'm really not a big fan of. It is an extreme scratch and smudge magnet, and I don't know how much you can see it on camera, but it's filled with scuffs. Not a fan. However, in the hands to hold, it is quite nice to touch. Looking underneath the controller here, you find 4 LED lights here at the bottom, which are useful for helping you figure out what player number you are and stuff. I like that it's underneath the pad so the lights aren't too intrusive, but to be honest, they are a bit annoying. I find that sometimes they flash for no reason at all. Like right now, my Switch isn't even on and it's still flashing. Who knows? The controller feels very solid, it's very comfortable in the hands, and as much as I'm trying to not compare this thing to the Joy-Cons, it really does feel a lot better. I love the attention to detail here on the hand grips of the controller itself. It has this dotted effect which feels quite nice to hold in the hands. The buttons here are also quite pronounced and large, so it's really easy to find when you're playing and you're not necessarily looking at your controller. I found myself pushing buttons all at the same time a bit much on the Joy-Cons, and this is something that you won't have problems with on the Pro Controller. The 4 buttons here, the plus, minus, home, and the screenshot button, they are a bit more discreet. As you can see, they're quite flat, which personally I like. I don't play any games which involve these buttons too much, so I like them being quite hidden. But if you do find you push the plus and minus buttons a bit more often, they are quite out of the way of the pad. I mean, it's still better than the Joy-Cons, to be honest. Overall, they're very sturdy and they don't feel like they're going to break or anything. The back buttons here are another great feature of the Pro Controller. They feel a lot sturdier than the Joy-Cons, which is something I've had a problem with. As you can see, it's got a really nice shape here, really comfortable to hold in the hands. The Pro Controller itself comes in a few different designs. However, if you really want to customize your pad, you can do something called a shell swap, which is something which I personally haven't done on my controller, but I have done on my Joy-Cons. There are plenty of guides on how to do this on YouTube, and they definitely go beyond the scope of this video, as it is quite technical. But word of warning, it is a little fiddly, and it can mess up your controller if things go wrong. So if you plan on doing a shell swap, caution is advised. But the results, definitely worth it. Now before you play, setup of this controller is really easy. First, you want to go on the home page of your Switch and hit the controllers button. Then you're going to want to hit the change grip order. Hit the sync button on your Switch Pro controller. Hold that for a few seconds. The Switch should make a noise and then you're good to go. You can connect up to 8 wireless controllers in this way. Now on to what this thing plays like. It's definitely a step up from the Joy-Cons, which can sometimes feel like you're going to break them in some intense gaming sessions. If you're playing your Switch a lot, especially in docked mode, this will improve your gaming experience. The size of the controller in particular makes the gaming experience a lot better. The comfortable feel translates to a better gameplay, and you'll overall enjoy your games a lot more. The stick stiffness is also something which is quite nice. I've had this controller a while and haven't experienced any stick drift of any kind. I definitely experienced that quite a bit on my Joy-Cons. If you do ever experience some stick drift on this thing, you can always open up the pad and you can fix it, so don't throw away your controller. However, it is again a bit technical and I'm not going to go into it on this video, but there's a really good video by NintendoLife that runs you through the process. I'll have that video linked below. Overall, the stick responsiveness is quite good and it has these satisfying clicky noises. Always like to hear. As mentioned earlier, the buttons are really nice. One of the main differences between the Pro Controller and the Joy-Cons is this D-pad here. Rather than 4 separate directional buttons, you get the kind of classic D-pad, which I really like about the pad. The D-pad also comes in really handy for your dungeon crawler type games, or any of you fighter fans out there. Street Fighter is a lot better on this thing than the Joy-Cons. Finally, the pad does have full HD rumble and motion controls, which is quite useful for your first person shooter games, or if you're trying to land a headshot with the bow and arrow in Zelda. Quick note guys, if you like this kind of review, consider dropping me a subscribe. I release weekly tech related videos, reviewing products and compiling the latest technology news. I'm still really new to YouTube, so I'd really appreciate your support. Anyways, back to the video. The Pro Controller charges up top with a USB-C type plug. It does take a while to fully charge, about 6 hours if you're going from empty, but to be fair, you can always play with it connected to your Switch if your setup allows. The power supply is closed, so you won't be able to stick in any batteries or anything like that, but I found that the battery lasts a very long time. Nintendo claims up to 40 hours. I can't say I've personally tested it till the battery dies, but I've never experienced it running out on me, but like, actually, never. This thing has never died on me. A little bonus tip, you can very easily connect the Pro Controller to your PC. So any games you do have on your PC, especially Steam games or any emulators, you can play with your Pro Controller. If you're interested in learning how to connect your Pro Controller to your PC, I'll leave a link to my video in the description down below. Finally, the price. Now the Pro Controller is a bit spenny. It's about 60 quid on the official Nintendo site or about £50 on Amazon, but it's still cheaper than Joy-Cons, so it's still definitely worth it. If you're looking for a step up from the Joy-Cons, there are other options before trying the Pro Controller, which are cheaper. In particular, the Power A controller, which is very similar to the Pro Controller, but you can get in a much wider variety of designs. The Power A controller is also a lot cheaper than the Pro Controller, which is another big plus. First pro has got to be the improved gaming experience. Not only does the dedicated D-pad really improve the gaming of like fighting games and your dungeon crawlers, but if you're serious about playing your Switch for extended periods of time, the Pro Controller can really make a big difference. The build quality and design. Now the Pro Controller feels a lot sturdier than the Joy-Cons, and I've personally dropped my pad quite a few times and I haven't had any problems. I also prefer the looks of this thing in comparison to the Joy-Cons. The long battery life. I'm personally not a fan of the whole wired gaming situation, so I really appreciate the fact that you can just plug this thing in for a couple of hours and then you're good to go for those longer gaming sessions. Now the biggest con has got to be the fact that the Switch already comes with a set of controllers, so unless you're buying a second pad for a second player, what's the point buying another controller when you already own a controller? Secondly is the price. Following on from the last point, spending 50-60 quid on a controller that you don't necessarily need is a bit much. If you're struggling with the Joy-Cons, you can always resort to third-party controllers, which often come in at a much lower price point. Now the final point might just be me, but I never use the Pro Controller unless my Switch is in docked mode. I think one of the best things about the Switch is the fact that you can play it in bed or on the sofa, and propping up your Switch on a table and then taking out your pad and then, yeah, it's just a bit weird to be honest. Without saying the Switch Pro Controller is a must, it kind of is a must. I'm a big fan of the Nintendo Switch and I find myself playing for extended periods of time while in docked mode quite often, and the Joy-Cons just don't do it for me. The Pro Controller offers a much more superior gaming experience and makes the Switch feel a lot more like other real consoles, such as your Xbox or your PlayStation. So ultimately, I think it comes down to what types of games you frequently find yourself playing and how you play them. So if you tend to play more chilled out games like Animal Crossing while you're lying down on a sofa or in bed or something in normal mode, then perhaps getting a Pro Controller won't change your life. But if you tend to find yourself playing more input heavy games like your Hades or your Street Fighter, or if you're playing docked mode quite a lot for extended periods of time, then getting a Pro Controller can really make a big difference. Finally, if you're looking to buy a second set of controllers for your Switch anyway, I'd recommend the Pro Controller because at the time of recording, they are cheaper than the Joy-Cons. So unless you're a big fan of the Joy-Cons, I don't really see why not, to be honest. So in conclusion, if you're serious about the Switch, I'd check out the Nintendo Pro Controller. But that's just my opinion. But what do you guys think? Do you think the Pro Controller's worth it? Or do you tend to stick to the Joy-Cons when you're having a cheeky Super Smash Bros sesh? Let me know in the comment section down below. Or feel free to just stop by and say hello. Did that work?